Well, greetings once again from Cooperstown, New York. We're very glad you could join us for another in our continuing series of virtual Voices of the Game programs. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different, but something I'm really looking forward to. We're going to talk to Thomas Tull, who is a member of the Hall of Fame's Board of Directors, was also the man who founded Legendary Pictures and was the head of Legendary through 2017. We're going to talk specifically to Thomas about his involvement in the film 42, about the late actor Chadwick Boseman, about a number of other baseball-related topics as well. And we may even get into a little Dark Knight and music conversation as well as we will proceed today. Thomas, a pleasure to meet you and talk to you. How are you doing this winter?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. And it's great to connect, even though that we certainly are all in difficult times. Keeping a constant connection to the Hall of Fame is important to me, and I was excited to do this.
I believe you live in the Pittsburgh area, so you know a little something about Northeast winters.
Yeah, we're having that, had some snow today, in fact, so sure did.
Yeah, well, we're matching you here as well. Thomas, a number of topics we wanted to talk about, including how it all kind of started for you. And actually, before we get started, I do want to thank the Ford Motor Company for their support of our programs. We're able to do these programs throughout 2021 because of the generous support of the Ford Motor Company. And Thomas, as we look back at your roots are very much here in central New York. You were born in the town of Endwell, New York, not far from Binghamton, really not far from Cooperstown. Thomas, tell us about growing up in Endwell and how you ended up becoming a baseball fan.
Well, I grew up a single mom and very challenging economic circumstances, or as we like to say, we were poor. And sports was everything. It was the great equalizer. So I certainly played football, basketball, baseball. But there was something magical to me about the game of baseball, the mythology, the numbers, the stories, the continuity. And, I rooted for the Yankees. I was a big Yankee fan and would watch a lot of the games. And sports is an enormous part of the tapestry in that area. In upstate New York, and specifically in Endwell, it's a little tiny place, but has done some very big things in sports, and it's a nice community.
Your mother was a dentist, right?
No, she was a dental assistant, dental hygienist.
Assistant.
Yes. Yeah.
So not an easy upbringing as far as the economic situation was concerned. You mentioned that you were a Yankee fan, which is natural. A lot of Yankee fans in central New York. Was there a Yankee player in particular that became an idol for you?
Absolutely. Greg Nettles. So I wore number 9 and everything college, because of Greg Nettles. And I've had the good fortune of becoming friendly with him. I brought him up here to Steeler games and, just sit around and tell stories with him, listen to his stories. But to me, he was my favorite player.
A guy with a reputation not only for being a great defensive third baseman and a terrific left-hand power hitter, but somewhat of a prankster, a guy with a sharp quip or two. As I recall with the Yankees, he was given the nickname Puff because he would kind of start trouble with a prank, and then he would disappear like a puff of smoke, and no one could find him.
Yeah, he's definitely very bright and has a great sense of humor. I laugh a lot when I'm around him, so he's great.
We should mention also that you have a strong connection to football. You're a part owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in addition to playing baseball as a youngster, you were a football player too.
Yep. Look, to me, sports is such an enormous opportunity to learn. The lessons learned on the ball field, to me, translate for a lifetime. And I can't say enough about how fortunate I am that I had great coaches and a support system, and try to continue that today. And I think one of the things I'm passionate about is making sure that today's kids have an opportunity to play baseball. It's a harder game economically to play If you have basketball, you just need a hoop and a ball. And so making sure that they have that opportunity in every area is something that, that's important to me. And again, I think those are lifelong lessons.
Along those lines, let's go back to 2016. Maine Enwell, really out of nowhere, wins the Little League title. It was the first title, Little League, for a New York State team, I think since the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. And you obviously, as a native of that area, you became actively involved as one of their supporters.
Well, we built out the new Little League parks in the spring of that year in April. And at that ceremony, some of the kids asked me, you got to remember, there's only 70 kids in the whole league, right? It's a very small area. And they said to me, would you come if we make it, to Williamsport, will you come? And if you do the math in your head on that, that's, pretty long odds. So I said, of course. And so they kept winning, and then they won the state and the regional. And I was getting their favorite players to make little videos for them. So Derek Jeter made one, Andrew McCutcheon made one, Bryce Harper, Rachel Robinson made one, Al Michaels, and it just kept building. And then I went and spent most of the week with them. And they won the American Championship on Saturday, and then played the Korean team, which was unbelievable on the field to watch them warm up. That was pretty impressive. And frankly, I thought, wow, this is if they just compete, I'm going to be incredibly proud. And when they won it all, I can't even describe the feeling. It was just so surreal. And what also I took away from that, if anybody listening has not been to the Little League World Series and been to Williamsport, put it on your list. And one of the things that I noticed with all the sort of strife and everything politically these days, these 11 and 12-year-olds from all over the world were just having fun. Like when they're not playing, they're playing ping pong against each other. And there was just I felt like we could learn a lot from watching that.
As you were watching those games, were you down at field level or were you in the stands?
I was in the stands, and ESPN kept cutting to me and asking questions and whatever. And I was like, gosh, I'm more nervous than I am at one of our Steeler games. And then around the fourth inning, when we played Korea, they asked me to come down to the side of the dugout and watch the rest of the game. And that was a very long last couple innings. But it was an amazing experience.
You mentioned the league very small. What about the school itself? Maine Enwell.
I graduated with about 220 kids, I think, and it's smaller than that now. And they've just done an amazing job between winning the Little League World Series. The high school football team, our team, won 62 straight games and was featured on an ESPN story. And, it's just a tight-knit community that sports is a pretty big part of.
Now, Thomas, 2 years after they win the championship, you receive a nice honor here, the 2018 Little League Hall of Excellence. Tell us about that honor.
Well, what an incredible thing to receive. I got a call from Little League and just said, we'd like you to come and accept this. And, it's a pretty amazing group of people. I was certainly humbled to be included. And, I have twin boys. And not only did we get to go to the game and everything, but they threw out the first pitch for the championship game, one to the American catcher and one to the international catcher, which was an incredible thing. But I just am, again, so passionate about Little League and about kids having the opportunity to play and compete. And obviously coming out of COVID, it'll never be more important.
Yeah. How old are your twins?
They're 11, which is hard to fathom, but they are.
Okay. So they're ball players, and I guess a year from now, they'll be eligible, right?
Yeah. So they play basketball and baseball, and, that's something they really love.
And what positions on the field do they play?
third base. One of them plays third base. The other one kind of plays outfield, rotates. At this age, you sort of have to mix and match them a little bit, but they're showing a little aptitude, so we'll see what happens.
Very good. Let's go back in time a little bit from 2016. We'll head back to 2000. That is when you start this company, Legendary Pictures. You're the founder. The company will become known for movies about superheroes, many popular characters from comic books, some horror films, some science fiction films. But then in 2013, Legendary produces this baseball film, 42, a wonderful movie. We're going to talk about it in depth. Thomas, who got the ball rolling on 42? Where did this idea start?
Well, within 2 weeks of each other, I had two conversations that shaped the whole thing. I was having dinner with Joe Morgan, who I'm on the Hall of Fame board with, and was very close with. Unfortunately, we lost Joe recently. And we were having dinner, and he said, when are you people going to come through for Mrs. Robinson and make a movie about Jackie? And I said, well, what do you mean it's not a group of us that have gotten together. And he said, you need to do this. And he said, I want to introduce you to Rachel. So I said, okay. And then maybe a week later, I was Ken Griffey Jr., who's another friend of mine, was in Los Angeles visiting. And he was telling me that he was doing a clinic in Florida. And he asked these kids, I think they were around 12 years old, how many had heard of Jackie Robinson, and very few raised their hands. Really? And he just said to me, that can't happen. And I said, you're absolutely right. The story of Jackie Robinson just grabbed me for the first time. My uncle took me to the Baseball Hall of Fame when I was 7 years old. Lou Gehrig's story and Jackie Robinson's story made a huge impression on me at a young age. So Joe set it up for me to go meet Rachel Robinson, who's a living icon, and was just sharp as a tack, and was a little. She just said, "Look, for 30 years I've been told this is going to happen, and I want you to promise me that you'll do this if I." And I looked at her and said, "Yes, ma'am." I mean, it's one thing to screw up Batman; it's another thing to when you're dealing with Jackie Robinson and that legacy. And I can tell you that my background is in tech and finance. It's not in making movies and television. It's just kind of a road that I took. And I had many experiences that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. 42 is the most special. I mean, that for many reasons is just a movie I'm immensely proud of, and the experience was incredible. And I generally don't get that nervous. But when we went to New York to show Rachel the movie, she asked me if she could invite some friends. So we got a screening room, and in comes Ken Chenault, who's the CEO of American Express, and and I'm like, Rachel, this is not what this is a little bigger than I envisioned. So I walked her to her seat, and when I went to go somewhere else, she grabbed my arm. She goes, no, you sit right here. Mm-hmm. And I was unbelievably nervous, right? Because you're going to show Mrs. Robinson. And about 25 minutes in or so, she hadn't done anything, was just looking straight ahead. And there was a moment between her and Jackie, played by the actors. And I just went for it and squeezed her hand. And I thought, well, if she knocks my hand away, I think I'm in trouble. And she squeezed it back and smiled at me. And after the movie, she got up and, was emotional and hugged me and said she loved it. And that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah. After the conversation initially with Joe Morgan and then the follow-ups with Ken Griffey Jr. and others, obviously as a producer, you've got to raise the money. You've got to have the financial backing. What then is your next move as a producer? Is it hiring a director and then letting him or her handle it from there? How does it work?
Well, it's fun. It's funny you mentioned that, Bruce, because actually Legendary, we weren't a production studio. We were a full-blown, we had our own money. We didn't ask anybody. When I wanted to make a movie, I said yes, and we made the movie. And it's funny you mentioned that, because Rachel said to me, how do I know? And I said, frankly, because all these producers that come and see you have to come and see somebody like us to say yes. So I don't need anybody else to say, yes, we can do this. And I promise you that. So I made one phone call to Brian Helgeland, who's a very well-known, decorated, Oscar-winning writer, director. And I said, Brian, would you like to do this? And he said, yes. And he started right away. And in terms of the duration that it took to mount the film and make it, it was very quick. And, it was obviously incredibly well received. And it's, it's something to see Chad, obviously. This is just this past year is, for so many reasons, has been unbelievable. But Chad was an unknown actor. And when he came to read for the part and put it on film, Brian kept calling me and saying, I'm telling you, this young man, and you watched him, and he had the fire and the passion, the chops, but the vulnerability. And he and I became very, very close throughout 42. And I told him, we were filming, your life's never going to be the same. And then he became the Black Panther, and certainly one of the best and most celebrated, appropriately, actors of his generation. And I miss him dearly as a friend. He was just an amazing human being.
I want to talk a lot more about Chad Boseman. Were you on the set pretty much every day when the film was being made? Is that typically what a producer would do?
Well, the dual role of, yes, producer in some cases, but because Legendary we were pretty big, so we're probably shooting 6 movies at the same time and 4 TV series. So given my affinity, I certainly popped down a fair amount, but I couldn't be on set every day. We had folks from Legendary that certainly were. I would be in constant contact with Brian, with our director. One of the most, so I'll mention 2 quick things that really stick out for me during filming. We were filming the Montreal scene in spring training. And I brought Rachel down. I believe we were filming in Georgia, and brought her down to the park where we were filming. And as I'm walking her across the field, both teams are in their uniforms. They're all in their Dodger uniforms. And you could hear and feel the murmurs and the whispers that's Rachel Robinson. Mm-hmm. So I brought her over, and certainly Chad, who had gotten to know her a bit, came over and gave her a big hug. And then one by one, all the other players, until they were all gathered around her. And it was just an absolutely incredible moment to be a part of and witness. And just to feel the respect and the, how they regarded her. Mm. And then I know we might talk about him later, but I brought Hank Aaron to set in Atlanta when we were shooting there. And obviously that's, anywhere Hank walked in the room. But it was an incredible experience, and something I'm truly grateful. I know that my life, sometimes I say I feel like it's like a Punk'd episode, that I think that the whole thing is somehow, I've gotten to do incredible things and stand next to incredibly talented people. And this is really a standout in my life. I do get, for those of you watching, I do get how incredibly lucky I am every single day.
As you mentioned, Chadwick Boseman at the time was relatively little known. I follow movies. I certainly follow sports-related movies. I had not heard of him. I saw him in this film, and I thought, like everybody, he was terrific. And I also look at the job that he did, playing somebody who is so well-known, so iconic. We have so many preconceived notions about Jackie Robinson. And that's what I think can make it so tricky when you play a celebrity, when you play a household name. And he was able to overcome all that in really nailing this role from start to finish.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't pretend to know or have the talent or even understand how to go to those places, right? The scene in the tunnel where he's breaking the bat, the scene between him and his screen time with Harrison Ford is incredible. Harrison told me early, he just said, this kid is unbelievable. But he never believed the hype. he had a humility about him that was just so genuine. And last year, before COVID hit and everything, he came to Pittsburgh, and I took him to practice with me. And he knew my kids and spent time with the kids. And we just the last time I ever saw him, he spent the day at my house, and he was obviously, we didn't talk about it a lot, but he was very thin, and knew that it was a struggle. But and at the same time, this March, or on Jackie Robinson Day, April 15th this year, we wanted to do something for African American hospitals that were struggling without having the proper gear and PPE. And so Chad and I were talking and did that together to try to get those folks some equipment. And even no matter how sick he was, I mean, he just kept checking in on that. And look, there's a lot of people that get famous and they're talented, and when they pass on, we celebrate them because they had a mark on culture. They did things that were notable. And every once in a while, we get someone that has the prodigious talent to do that, but is such a remarkable human being. And I can tell you, there's no way you got to know Chad and didn't just, feel that extra aura about him. And I will miss him and do miss him dearly.
It sounds like you knew that he was quite ill. He did not publicly reveal that. I didn't read any media reports at all about him being ill, much less, being on the verge of passing. It's amazing that in his last few years, he continued to work. It's almost as if he felt, I don't have very long and I want to get the most work done that I can do. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't even understand, with what he was going through, to show up, act, and to be honest, Ma Rainey, which is his last performance, I've waited. I'm going to see it soon. I just needed a little bit of time, and I have heard and know he's remarkable in it, and to know what he's going through while he gives that performance, it's hard to put your mind around it.
Thomas, one final question on him. We all, I think, unanimously agree that he was terrific in this role as Jackie Robinson. How did he view his performance? Was he satisfied, or did he say, well, I could have done this better, I could have done that better? What was his opinion?
Well, first and foremost, his work ethic. Chad was a basketball player. He wasn't a natural baseball player. One of the things that just bugs me as a fan is if I see a movie and the guy's supposed to be a quarterback and he can't throw, it just takes me out of it. And so we brought in, certainly a trainer, but also baseball instructors, and he worked unbelievably hard because he wanted to look authentic. Mm-hmm. And he took that very, very seriously. And I think he was always pushing himself, but also he knew, I think he got to a place which to me is the perfect blend. Always strive, but don't torture yourself with, I always could have done better. You can take some satisfaction in your craft. And I think he had that right blend.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about Hank Aaron coming on set, but you were very close friends with Hank Aaron. You knew him extremely well. We were all shocked to hear the news last Friday that Hank had passed away in his sleep at the age of 86. He had seemingly been in good health. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Hank over the years.
Well, a mutual friend introduced us probably 10 or 12 years ago, and I got to know him and his wife, Billy. Did some things with their foundation that they just did amazing work, and we got to be friends. I hosted when his portrait was put in the Smithsonian. I had the great honor of hosting that. And he was, again, just the kindest, man you'd ever want to meet. His stories were incredible. I'll tell you something that I thought was an amazing moment that I'll remember forever. I was at dinner in Santa Monica with Hank and Billy, with his wife, and so at this restaurant, and so in comes someone that I know, and looks over and sees that it's Hank Aaron and motions to me. So I went over to this person, and he said, "Oh my God, Thomas, that's Hank Aaron?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "Well, I need a minute to kind of gather myself. Would you introduce me? Would that be okay?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, Steven Spielberg, I'm sure he'd be okay meeting with you." And I brought Steven over, and we had a lovely time. But Steven was genuinely like a little kid.
Yeah.
And I ran into him a week or so again later, and he just said, "I can't believe it." And Hank sent him a signed baseball or something, and I think Steven sent him a signed poster. But his effect on people was amazing. And I did a documentary for fun called Fastball, because I wanted to know, with my science and tech, I wanted to know who the fastest pitcher of all time was. And so we worked with some Carnegie Mellon physicists and put this together. And Hank's in the film talking about how a fastball hops and rises, and his perception of it. And I just, again, this is one of those people that is a hero to so many, but carries himself with such a class and dignity. And I just want to turn the page from this whole thing. It just seems like every other week.
Yeah.
But he'll be missed.
As a follow-up to that, Thomas, we actually have a question in our chat room. Normally we go to these later, but this ties into Hank Aaron. Michael Haupert wants to know, was there ever any discussion of making a movie on the life of Hank Aaron while you were at Legendary?
The two movies that I thought would be interesting while I still had the place was Roberto Clemente and Hank. So there was a friend of Hank's who also did the Michael Jordan series, did I think a book with Hank, and they were working on making something. And I was friendly with the guy, so it seemed like they were going to try to get something done. So we discussed it, but because someone was already working on it, we didn't really pursue it. But certainly there's a story that I'd love to see as a fan.
Again, with a film about such iconic characters, often difficult to find the right person. You almost think that Chadwick Boseman might have been a good fit for a Henry Aaron film. Probably have to put a few pounds on, but from his look in 2012 when he was kind of a thinner version of Jackie Robinson. You think about finding an actor to play Clemente. Not easy to do. It has to be someone who's Latino and Black, who can speak English and Spanish, can speak Spanish fluently. It's such a challenge in trying to make these films. I mean, they're wonderful ideas on paper, and they're worthwhile topics to pursue, but if you don't have the right actor, it doesn't work.
That's exactly right, because a couple of challenges you have is if you have a famous actor, it almost takes you out of it because it's so-and-so playing this iconic person. I think that's tough. The reason I think playing Babe Ruth is tough in every movie, because it's hard to be anybody other than Babe Ruth. And then, you certainly want to have their characteristics and their fire, or whatever their traits are, portrayed, but you also have to give the actor enough room to not be a mimic, right? And so forth. So it absolutely is challenging across the board when you make a story about a famous person. But that's the risk and reward. And I always tell people, you got a stack of papers called a script, and you get a group of people together that are talented. and you run a camera, run film through it, and at the end of it, the chemistry of the cast, the way the whole thing comes together, it's alchemy. And as someone I had no background in movies or television before I started Legendary, so I had kind of a unique perspective, and it really is the alchemy business.
Another great sports-related film that you produce, I thought it was terrific, was We Are Marshall. It maybe didn't get the publicity of some other sports movies, but I really enjoyed that when I saw it. As you look back, when you were growing up, was there a baseball film that really grabbed you? That you were already a baseball fan, but maybe something that gave you the idea that, hey, one day I'd like to maybe be involved somehow in producing a film like that. Was there a baseball film that you really grew up with?
Well, look, so I would say two things. I never in a million years thought I'd have anything to do with. I wasn't like a film. I loved movies, but I never thought I'd have anything to do with it. If you would ask, my younger self, I would have told you, "What are you talking about? I'll be playing for the Yankees, and I'll be in it," because you have that sort of non-informed point of view. But I loved Pride of the Yankees. When I was a little kid, I remember seeing that, and just the Lou Gehrig story was incredible to me. And then, of course, I'm a huge fan of The Natural. I just love there's something, Roy Hobbs, that whole thing is incredible. Field of Dreams, the classics.
You ever met Robert Redford?
I have. Yeah, I have. And, talked to him a fair amount, and he's another icon.
Yeah. I've got to ask you, one of my favorite actors was in that movie. He was kind of the antagonist, Robert Duvall. Still with us all these years later. Ever met him?
I haven't. And that's one of my, he's Tom Hagen. He's Bobby D. He's the great Robert Duvall. So I've never met him. But he's one of those actors that, you'd pay to watch him sit and read the paper on the park bench.
Yeah. We mentioned that the film 42 came out in 2013, but something else significant happened that year for you. You were named to the Hall of Fame's board of directors. I believe it was December of that year. When you were first approached about this, what was your reaction?
It was a prank. I thought it was a prank. No, again, growing up in upstate New York, having proximity to it, my uncle took me for the first time when I was 7 years old. The Hall of Fame is sacred ground for me. So it was an incredible honor to be asked to join the board of directors, and something that's extremely important to me, because I think we all have our own interpretation of what Cooperstown is. People will say, is it a museum? It's a Hall of Fame? And to me, it's whatever those stories are that grab you. But baseball is part of our cultural fabric. It's part of our continuum and how we connect even generations and stories and players. And the Hall of Fame does an incredible job, and Cooperstown as well. Every time I go back to Cooperstown, it's nice to go to a place that you can count on. You know what I mean? It's the small town charm and the sort of DNA of the place never changes. And I think the leadership of the Hall of Fame has done a great job of keeping things dynamic and respecting the past, certainly, but then using new mediums to tell stories and to be the light keeper for the next generation.
Thomas, as a member of the board of directors, what are the kinds of things that you're asked to do, that you're asked to vote on? Give us a little insight into what it entails.
Well, it goes from everything from budgets, right? Things that are just sort of blocking and tackling and the things that you would normally do in governance. And then, we'll discuss strategic direction about, how should we think about this? Or or things even when COVID hit, and it's, look, we have Derek Jeter and this amazing class coming out. Should we, that was a big conversation. Do you do it virtually? Do you, how do you handle this? There's no manual for this. And I think, there's just no two board meetings are the same, and it's an amazing group of people. I'm definitely, the sort of, I feel like I won a contest or something, but between the Hall of Fame players and the executives, there's a few owners, our Commissioner Manfred's on the board, the Commissioner of Baseball. So it's a great group. And some of it is just tick and tie normal governance, and some of them are certainly bigger thematic things about how should you think about voting, not voting for the players, the baseball writers do that, but just the mechanism itself. How do we audit that? How do we think about that? And so it's, those are some historic conversations to be adjacent to.
Prior to the pandemic, would being on the board of directors require that you come to Cooperstown X number of times a year?
Yes. Yeah. So, and which is, a great excuse to get there.
Yeah. So you'd come here for a Hall of Fame weekend.
Yes.
And I believe there's a spring training meeting too that may traditionally take place.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it intimidating to be in the room with some of these other giants of the game? Because there are, several Hall of Famers on the board.
Yeah. The first couple, you're sitting there. The good news for me is I was friendly with Joe Morgan, who was the chairman of the board, and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. And look, absolutely the answer is yes. But after a little while, when you get to be friendly and you realize, then you're just sort of, you get to know the people, right? You get to know them as a person rather than just, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting next to you. But yes, meeting, when I had to give a speech for the Hall of Fame on Hall of Fame weekend a number of years ago, and I walked to the podium, and when I kind of glanced behind me, and there's Sandy Koufax and Bob Gibson and Hank Aaron, and you're just out of body experience, right? Don't trip walking across, and don't, So it's there is something to me that's just different about baseball legends. Just different.
You mentioned speaking during the weekend. Was that the year that Rachel Robinson received the Buck O'Neill Award?
I think it was, yes.
Yeah. And obviously, you become very close to Rachel because of the
Yes.
film 42. We are going to take questions that our viewers and participants have for Thomas. You can do that in our Zoom group chat. Some folks have already chimed in. We'll try to get to some of those questions as we proceed. Here we have, of course, a photograph of the great Cal Ripken with Thomas Tull. I'm not sure if this is in Cooperstown or somewhere else. Do you remember the occasion for this meeting?
I almost think we did a ribbon cutting for One for the Books, the new wing. I think that's what it was, I think.
You also had mentioned a few moments ago the film, the documentary Fastball that you worked on. And it was a few years ago that actually premiered in our Grandstand Theater.
Yeah.
They tried to make a determination of who had the fastest fastball in history, interviewed a lot of people, used historical research, trying to remember, who did they conclude was the fastest pitcher ever?
Yeah, for people that haven't seen it, I don't want to ruin it, but Nolan Ryan, and we actually used pretty sophisticated physics and mathematics to determine that. So our panel of physicists and mathematicians felt pretty strongly that that this was not subjective, that they had kind of figured it out. That idea was born out of sitting in we were sitting in the basement or wherever we were sitting at the Hall of Fame, and Cal was there, Joe Morgan was there, Johnny Bench was there, Phil Necro was there. Gosh, I'm missing one or two others, but we had a rain delay. We literally were waiting to do something, and it was raining, so we were kind of waiting. And everybody's telling stories, and I just went around the room and said, "Who's the fastest pitcher you ever faced?" And they had different answers. And I said, I want to find out, because there's that Bob Feller film of him throwing against the motorcycle and everything. And I said, we can do better than that, I think. And but that was a lot of fun. We had everybody said yes and was in it, and it was a lot of fun to make.
That actually ties into a question from our chat room. It's from Bill, and he wants to know about the Grandstand Theater, where that film was shown a few years ago. Bill wants to know, can you talk about your involvement with the Grandstand? It's become an awesome addition to the museum.
Well, thank you. So we, our family foundation which I guess is a fancy way of saying when I just give to a cause or something, but there's so many visitors that go through there. And to me, it was the theater and the leadership of the Hall of Fame decided, look, it needs to be updated, because, everybody comes to the Hall of Fame. They all go through that. And so then the answer was, okay, well, we can make it look better. And then why don't we produce a film that, has some meaning, we hope, and emotion, and conveys how much we love the game. So myself and Jonathan Hawk, who's a great director, has done who I did Fastball with as well, and has done many of the best ESPN 30 for 30s, made the film that you now see that's running, and so we just felt like you're coming through the Hall of Fame, you're seeing the artifacts, you're immersed in it, and then to be able to step in that great venue and see a film that hopefully brings some emotion to it. And that was our goal.
For those who haven't seen the film, it's about 15, 16 minutes long. It's called Generations of the Game. Features commentary from a number of Hall of Famers, some other nationally known folks, also some highlights of great plays, and it is part of the experience that we offer here in the Grandstand Theater. Another question from the chat room comes in from Daniel. Thomas wants to know, or he says, Thomas, he wants to know, of all the athletes you have met, is there one that has surprised you in some way that you really enjoyed spending time with? Maybe you didn't think that you'd like them and you really did.
That's an interesting question. I've gotten to know Russell Westbrook very, very well, the basketball player. And Russell, his on-court persona is pretty salty, right? Like and off the court, he's nothing like that. He's he's a very astute businessman, owns a bunch of car dealerships, and, invests in a bunch of things. And he was nothing like what I thought he would be. And so I would say Russell, is pretty great. And I have to mention, I grew up bleeding black and gold. I know we're baseball, but just on the football side for a minute. So I've had the absolute privilege of becoming friendly with Joe Green and Franco Harris and Lynn Swann and Terry and all the legends from the 70s. And so Jack Lambert, who doesn't come around much, he kind of is to himself. He was my favorite player. And so a couple of years ago, I talked my way into him having lunch with me. And he was exactly what I wanted him to be. He had strength in his hands. We had a great lunch. He was himself. And there was this moment that a guy came over to the table and said, hey, to get an autograph. And he said, hey, Jack, I hate to bother you. And he looked up at the guy and he said, then don't. And it was just like, that's awesome. And then after lunch was over, I brought him for a second to meet my kids. And he got down on one knee and was a completely different person, and was so good to my kids and everything. So it's always, when you meet someone who's notable or that you have an affinity, or, oh my God, there's that dual edge of they're a human being. So, they can have a bad day or maybe not be your favorite person. And then there's other people that completely surprise you. So that's what I would say.
You mentioned Mean Joe Green a few moments ago. I don't know if there's ever been a more famous sports commercial.
Yeah.
The one he did must have been late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Cola, that kind of showed a different side to his persona. On the field, he was known as this mean, brutal player. Off the field, very different. What is he like?
He is the only one I get nervous around. And not because he does anything. It's just, I can't. I mean, first of all, maybe now, but 7, 8 years ago, I would have said if you put a helmet on him and told him to go out for a couple plays, he'd pull it off. I mean, he's an intelligent man and is just has this aura about him. And I love talking to him, but I never lose sight. I don't know. Like the other guys, like Franco's like the nicest guy in the world. We go to dinner all the time and he's gregarious and it's Franco. Hey, Franco. With Joe Green, I still call him Mr. Green. And you never lose perspective on that.
Another one of our viewers, Steve Pakin, wants to know, who is your favorite Pirates player of all time?
Well, Roberto Clemente and Andrew McCutchen, because he's a buddy and he's did an incredible job and is the classiest. I love Andrew, so I'm going to split the vote. But Roberto Clemente, I mean, was poetry in motion.
With McCutchen, it must have been tough to see him leave the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, he actually would come to most of the Steelers game in the off season and sit with me during the games. We're still very good friends, it was tough to see him leave because he's so great for the city. He was absolutely beloved here. Does so much in terms of for the community and charitable works and so forth. But yeah, it was definitely sad to see him go.
Still have a few more questions in the chat room. This might be from somebody that you know. Here's what he says. Hi, Thomas. How does your past athletic experience impact your life today? It's signed Coach Crooks.
Oh, well, that's Coach Gary Crooks, who is a longtime baseball coach at Maynardville High School, where I played. I played for Coach Crooks, and it's something that I draw on every single day, right? The ability to, I think, have resolve, resiliency, understand that life sometimes keeps score, and that even though you might have a good excuse, the umpire missed the call, nobody cares, right? And Coach Crooks in particular, we named the field after him at Maynardville. He coached there for a long time, impacted so many kids that came through the school. And I remember talking to his own kids about the number of hours he had to be away from the family, coaching us and taking care of everything. It's not like we had some massive budget. And Coach Crooks is a very, very special man, and I'm glad he's on today. And certainly his guidance had a major impact on me and anything that I've been able to do. So that's how I'd answer that question, but it's good to see you on, Coach.
Yeah, very nice. I would be remiss if I did not ask at least one question about these two wonderful films, The Dark Knight with the late Heath Ledger, and then The Dark Knight Rises. I'm not a particular fan of the Batman franchise, but both of these films were outstanding. I thought The Dark Knight should have won the best Oscar picture. The Dark Knight Rises is always on television, and I watch it every time. I get caught up in it. I can't prevent it from happening. These two films, I think in particular, you must have special pride in.
Yeah, and in these cases, I mean, Chris Nolan, the director, we did 5 movies with Chris. He's one of the greatest. He's truly brilliant. And that word gets used maybe a little too often in Hollywood. But Chris Nolan just is, he'll go down as one of the greatest directors of all time. So his vision and being able to bring The Dark Knight to the screen and the storytelling Heath Ledger's performance, I think, is one of the greatest in film history, and just an incredible experience. And one of the things that was great, so when I read the script for The Dark Knight Rises, and there was a football scene with a stadium, I went to Chris and I said, I know where we're filming this. So we shot the movie in Pittsburgh. That's our stadium. And it did a couple of things. It allowed me to take two things I love, Steeler football and The Dark Knight, and have the same experience. But a couple of things I'll never forget is, we made the field look all blown up and everything. And I was walking out with Mr. Rooney, Mr. Rooney, Dan Rooney. And he looked up at me. I said, Mr. Rooney, we're going to put it back. I promise it's going to be okay. He's also one of the greatest human beings I've ever met in my life. And I miss him very much as well. And the second thing is, when I would be at practice or just around the guys, inevitably, players would run up to me and say, T. Tull, look at this face. You got to put me in a movie. You got to put me in a movie. So I said, okay, you guys are going to be the Gotham Rogues. You're all going to line up. Hines Ward returned the kickoff in the movie. So that's all the guys. And don't ask me again. We're just going to pan down. And then one of the last days of shooting, I went to say goodbye to Chris. And he said, hey, I need you to come in here into the owner's suite. You're going to play the owner of the Gotham Rogues. You're going to put the jacket on. And I thought he was kidding. And I was like, oh, that's good. I'm going back to LA, Chris. This was a great time. Everything went well. And he said, no, I'm dead serious. And honestly, I wasn't playing hard to get. I was like, I don't want to do that. And he goes, no. And it's very British. He's like, put the jacket on. You're going to stand right here. And so obviously you see in the film, I play the owner of the Gotham Rogues, and I'm up in the owner's suite, and he blows me up. And I said to him later, now I get it. It's wish fulfillment. Now I understand why you wanted me in that role. So
we have a number of people asking about future films for you, Thomas, in the chat room. Now, you left Legendary Pictures in 2017, so you're not doing that anymore. But I guess that begs the question, is that something you might consider getting back into the film production business at some level down the line?
Well, look, for the last 4 years, I have Tullco, which is my holding company. We buy companies and we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to sort of enhance their characteristics and returns, hopefully. And that's what I do full time. And so I'm kind of back to my tech and finance roots. There are aspects of it that I certainly miss, the storytelling, being around talented people. So I sold the company in 2016, and I have a producer credit on the Dune series coming out, and on King Kong versus Godzilla, which was sort of my juvenile thing that I wanted to see when we started the whole Godzilla franchise. And look, for the right project, I would consider doing something, but it's certainly, I'm never going to sort of go back to that as a full-time thing, but for the right project, I would certainly consider it.
One thing that you do quite a bit of is music. You've got a noted band, and you have made tour appearances, put together albums. I mean, this is something you're very active with. Tell us about this.
Well, look, the one thing that is just a little bit eclectic about my brain is I'm fascinated with physics. I love sports. I love music and culture and history. And I'm just, a little bit all over the place in terms of deep interest. So I've played since I was a kid. I love playing with a band. There's something about writing the music and making it happen. And so the last year we played with the Rolling Stones, and then did a tour with ZZ Top, and then played Bob Seger's last run, which was incredible. Look, again, I told you, I feel like Forrest Gump. The first time you walk out in front of 60,000 people and, we're opening for the Rolling Stones, that is an out-of-body experience. They happen to be my favorite band of all time. And we sort of have that sound, Black Crowes, Rolling Stones, rock and roll. And I enjoy writing, and it's a blast and something that I'm going to continue to do.
doing shows with the Rolling Stones and ZZ Top. There is a book alone that could be written from those two experiences.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if all of you are part of this elaborate punked episode, not cool. So,
Thomas, we want to thank you for spending this past hour with us. It's been a lot of fun to get your thoughts on baseball, but also movies and music, your involvement with the Hall of Fame's board of directors. We really do appreciate your time with us. I also have to mention that Thomas went to the finest college in this country, Hamilton College. I'm not saying that because I went there as well, though I did graduate 5 years before Thomas in 1987, but we do have that in common. We missed each other by a half a decade. It was a wonderful place. We had both, I'm sure, had great times there. I know I did, and I'm sure Thomas did in the 90s, but we really do appreciate your time over this past hour. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Again, Thomas Tull, member of the Hall of Fame's board of directors, has been joining us. We appreciate his time. We also want to give a final thanks to the Ford Motor Company. These programs that we do, like the one today, Virtual Voices of the Game, would not be possible without the generous support of the Ford Motor Company. Thanks for being with us today. Have a great day, everyone.